Welcome back, everybody, to Rugby Chalk Talk with Levi and Joe. We got a special guest today, but again, we want to thank you like we did last time with all the positive feedback and support you guys have been giving us. We really appreciate it. Tonight, we got a guy, he's great talent, great rugby player, and overall a good guy in the short time I've talked to him.
Levi, this is I'm very excited for this one. It's a good friend of mine, New Years ago, but he's played at the highest level at just about every age group, and right now he is a two-time MLR champion for the Seattle Seawolves. Mike Sheperd. How you doing, Mike?
Doing well, thanks, fellas. How are you?
Doing well.
Doing pretty good.
We appreciate you coming on, taking the time, and as always, good to see you and talk to you. As you know, our show, we like to share stories, get the rugby story out there. Hopefully the next young guy can pick up a few things and do it better than any of us could, and just keep passing it on. Rugby's growing like crazy right now, and hopefully we can make an impact in multiple communities by doing this. So, again, thank you for your time. We're going to go down. You have a long rugby playing career, a lot of different jerseys, but what started or who introduced you to rugby?
Right. So picture early 2000s. I bet some of our listeners weren't even alive when we started playing rugby, Joe. Picture early 2000s, middle school in Brownsburg, springtime in 8th grade. I was playing club baseball and I was doing track. And by track, I mean specifically discus and shot put. I was not running anywhere. And you remember Kurt Trout, of course. He was actually our throwing coach somehow. He had no experience in track, but he was a football rugby guy trying to get guys in shape and recruiting, whatever. So I'm doing track and baseball in that spring, and since our high school team had just started a full contact high school team in the years prior, they wanted to get some 8th grade or middle school development going. So they started a middle school touch team. Our buddy William Robbins, a.k.a. Frosty, his dad was the head coach. We'll tell you the story how I got the nickname later. And so, he got a bunch of the guys to come out. And like I'm sure for most of you guys in the room or listening, it was, one touch of the ball and one run of the game, and I was hooked. There was no choice going into freshman year picking a spring sport. It was rugby all the way.
That's awesome. Definitely really cool that you guys kind of just put it together and then moved on to the high school level together. One thing that I tell players, especially when I coached at Brownsburg, Mike, when a wrestler would come out or something, I would tell them they were allowed to quit rugby, but they had to play one game first, and no one ever quit. Just like you.
Yeah.
They picked it up and
no,
they loved
that's
it.
a smart rule.
Yeah.
Because it's a new, especially at that time and in our region where we grew up, it's a very new thing culturally and as a sport. So once you make everybody sort of dive head first into it, there's just no going back.
Absolutely. One more quick note on Trout. I've told Levi quite a bit about Coach Trout. It's interesting. You said he was on the track, the team as a coach. Not only did he coach football and rugby, that guy did driver's ed, and he also coached junior high basketball.
Get out of here.
He did it all, man.
You didn't tell me he did driver's ed.
He did driver's ed.
I think he, looking back, he was an expert in networking and recruiting. He got people from every sport crisscrossing.
Yep.
Got his hands in all the honeypots in terms of the athlete crossover. Good on him. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Him coaching track made no sense. I remember running a lot and throwing sometimes.
I mean, he knew how to tell people how to run. I mean, that was easy, right?
No mistake.
Sounds familiar.
So it's funny because Levi, when I tell stories about Trout, Levi's always like, "That reminds me of you. That reminds me of you." And I was like, "Good, blame Trout."
Learn from the best.
Absolutely. So that 8th grade year, you kind of got introduced to it. You said it was touch. What are some of the highlights? Like you said, it was a no-brainer to move forward to the high school level. What were some of the highlights at the high school level coming in with that big group from the 8th grade year into your freshman season?
Yeah, you make a good point. We did have a big group. I remember coming in with a big class of guys from my grade, and we had a good run of maintaining that high volume of guys, like running through freshmen through senior year. So it was special in that regard, having the same class of guys play through. I always thought that our club brought out a lot of good people for the most part, right? Like I think that's one of the aspects of the sport that, for folks who aren't familiar with it, should know is that culturally it's really unique and really special and very welcoming, right? It brings, the best out of every corner of the world come together for this crazy contact sport. And afterwards you have dinner with the other team and these guys, and it's just super unique that way. So that was very attracting early on. Plus, as Joe, as a lineman in football growing up your whole life, we never got to run the ball. So, as a young teenager, this was just everything we ever wanted. We can let out all of our middle school, high school aggressions out on our neighboring communities through rugby. Undoubtedly, like a big draw to the sport. But yeah, overall the people, and I love the competition. Indiana at the time, and I'm sure now, was surprisingly competitive, right? With high school teams from northern Indiana, central Indiana, a few from the south, and then neighboring Ohio and Illinois, and throughout the Midwest actually. So it was good competition too. So it wasn't just for fun and goofing around. We actually competed at a high level. As you remember, Brownsburg in I believe 2005, it would have been my freshman year, went to nationals and won the second division championship, but that was only in their 5th year of existence. So we had a good crop of athletes, obviously good coaching, and just a good crew to make it all happen. So those are pretty unique. Well, actually, you and I played on the state team, right? The Indiana Select All-Stars South, the Dirty South, I believe, was our
Were those the pictures you showed me?
mantra.
Yeah, I showed Levi some of the pictures.
Oh, God, you have one of those pictures?
Oh, multiple
Ew,
pictures.
Lord. That's the trouble with Facebook these days, eh?
Yeah, I know. They could track it all the way back. You know what's great about that picture? You look at it and just some of the guys like yourself and Matt Wagner and Hollingsworth and some guys that did some really good rugby things. It was kind of cool that we all got together for one weekend and we're on the same team.
Yep, it's pretty special. I'm still close with a few of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome, and every time I kind of bump into them, it's what we bring up. It's what we're comfortable and remember each other from. Levi's been a part of some groups like there's all-star teams now a lot more than when you and I played. One of the big ones, as you may know, is ERA, Eagles Impact Rugby Academy. It kind of gets these top-notch kids from each school, whether it's a club or a high school, on the same team, do a little bit of traveling, get more in tune with the rugby culture outside of the school level, and play some high-level tournaments. Was there anything like that for you? I know you just said the Indiana State team. Was there anything outside of that while at Brownsburg that maybe you participated in camps and something that you had to really be a high value to kind of be a part of?
Yeah, I think it was based through our time on the Indiana South Select team where I got selected to go to a camp for, at the time, was called the USA age grade system. And so I believe it was the USA U18 team I made at some point, maybe my junior year, and took me on my first U.S. sort of select side to overseas. So when I was like 16, junior in high school, with maybe 2 genuine years under my belt, I was playing for the U.S. overseas against Leicester Academy, Leeds Academy, and I think a couple others. If anybody was there, they could say fairly, I was just a total fish out of water. But really invaluable experience, right? Like, get to travel overseas, play the sport you love, represent your country, and kind of get out of your own bubble in terms of geography as well as culturally and personally too. So it was a good growing moment for me personally. One, to recognize, hey, you're not as good as you thought you were. And two, to kind of grow a bit, as a young man. It was really good for me early on. And also motivating too, right? To come back the next year and keep earning those selections and improve. And ultimately I found it a good driver for me in my pathway through life.
Mike, I got to ask you, since Joe's my coach now, is there any funny moments of Joe Rugby that I should know about? Yeah. Give me something good like him getting laid out or something.
This is no funny guys. Joe's not a funny guy.
We'll save the proper stories for a beer one of these days. But I do remember specifically, Joe was an absolute monster. Unassuming, just muscle hamster coming out of left field. He was a strong prop in the set piece, and he hit extra hard. Every scrum, every ruck, every contact, you're just like, you always were just kind of surprised. You're like, damn, this guy bangs.
You know what?
So
this is why he's a friend.
If he ever advocates for himself, it's true. I will back up the fact that he was tough as nails back in the day.
Oh, come on now.
This is why I had him on, because I knew he'd lie.
Yeah,
I knew it. I knew he'd do it.
I would lie for my friend too.
Well, the first 2 years of high school, I'm like I said, fish out of water. I remember games freshman and sophomore year, I just didn't. It took me years to figure out what was going on. You go from ruck to ruck just because you think you're supposed to. I didn't really do anything. You just ran around, and you tackle people because that's one thing we did know how to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of you follow the pattern, right? And then eventually
it becomes second nature eventually.
Yeah, the game slows down, and you can actually make an impact on the game outside of the normal pattern.
Right.
I saw the same thing in Levi when he played I coached Levi in junior high at Brownsburg.
Yeah.
Then he played at Avon High School, and he was a pattern player. He did what the coaches said. By the time I came to IUPUI, he was going into his sophomore season, and I realized he's not a pattern player. He actually sets our forwards up. When we run a 1-3-3-1, he keeps the formation going. When we do a 2-4-2 and we need to go to him and what we call a piss-off behind our other 3-4 or our other three forwards in the middle, he's the guy that gets it and makes the pass to the back line and sets that up. And he's played so much rugby, he's outside of just running the pattern, like you just said, ruck to ruck, to where you can make an impact on the game.
Yeah, that's every team at least needs a few of those guys, those kind of quarterbacks, those guys who have the vision and the foresight, right? So you can picture phases ahead of the given phase you're at.
Yes.
No, that's really encouraging to hear. And I definitely remember what it was like not knowing. You just kind of go RoboCop and you just go for it. But no, it's good to hear, Levi. Good on you.
Yeah, thank you.
When high school was wrapping up, I know you went to IU for, was it 2 or 3 years? Was IU the plan education-wise, or did rugby have anything to do with that?
Yeah, both. I grew up in a house, got a degree from IU Bloomington at some point and in some facet. So that was kind of always the plan. My brother and sister did their business school there, so they kind of got in my ear early that may be a good, educational pathway. I'd always known about the rugby clubs between IU and Purdue. We'd seen a lot of those games, so I knew they were, decently competitive with, good guys from the area that I know that we played with or against in high school. And I had gotten some scholarship money in a few different ways, not a lot, but, different scholarships here and there that attributed towards IU tuition. So there's a lot of motivations there. Plus being in state's just nice around the folks and had a good set at freshman year. So yeah, it was pretty much the pathway. I know that, I'm trying to think, senior year of high school, I didn't really have any other athletic options. I know rugby was number one. Football-wise, my best chance was to long snap at Butler. That was about my prime, football opportunity, which, by the way, I think playing long snapper professionally is like one of the best jobs you could probably ever have.
Highest paid.
It's still my favorite. And I'm still trying to get the long snap implemented in rugby. Every coach I've had, I suggest it. They say, yeah, that's cool, and then we never do it. So hopefully this next MLR season will be the one, a long snap to a drop goal or something.
It's got to be. It's got to be this time. This next season.
So
Levi had a question for you.
Yeah. I know going back to my senior year of high school, I had options to play football as well. And I had my own reasons for choosing rugby and IUPUI, but what were your big reasons for choosing rugby?
It was kind of just in my heart, right? Early on, I had got those U.S. age grade selections where I'm like, wow, this is what I want to do and where I want to go. And I certainly love football at the time, and I still do. I think I just knew at the time that rugby was my passion and what I wanted to pursue, and potentially a good avenue for me to advance and keep it going.
Yeah.
It was just, for all the reasons, just really attractive and what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I get that.
When you were playing at IU, did they have the Big Ten put together like they do now, or was it more like play men's teams, try to find Illinois, stuff like that?
They did. I think they had the Big Ten split into two groups, and you did catch. So there's like the Big Ten conferences, Big Ten tournament, and then you'd also kind of unilaterally play in the Midwest Collegiate Club bracket. So we played the Bowling Greens, and the men's clubs, right? Like the indie men's crew we saw.
We don't like Bowling Green.
So it was a little bit of both. I'm trying to think. I got selected. Oh yeah, so I graduated high school, right? May of 2008. I graduate senior year. The day after we walk for graduation, I'm on a plane to Wales to play in the Junior World Cup for the U.S. under-20 team.
Wow.
So I think this was 12 years ago. And we were in the top tier, playing against all the big names. And so I got selected, go to the tour. I think we had a small Ireland tour the Christmas before that. But I made the cut. And so we get there, and it was like 6 or 8 weeks of competing with some of the big names in USA Rugby that you'll see today. Scott Lavala, Zach Test, Nate Ebner, currently with the Pats, right?
Yeah.
All these other big names. Forgive me for not mentioning you guys if you're listening to this. And again, I found myself sort of like a fish out of water, right? I was a little undersized in some capacities, but certainly inexperienced. I was just, you can't go from Midwest high school rugby to that stage and think you're going to succeed as well. And part of it's, my experience, and some of it was just growing up a bit too, to like, not that I was too cocky, but I certainly needed that humility to say, hey, if you want to compete at this level, you better recognize that there's a lot more competition out there and there's a lot of ways you can improve. And certainly some pathways you can take to keep it going. I remember I played 0 minutes that tour. We played 5 games, lost all of them. I played 0 minutes, rode the pine the whole time. And actually, Salty Thompson, the EIRA guy, he was our coach for that year. And the following year, I made the U20s, but he told me on the second tour, he's like, we didn't plan on bringing you back. What got us to bring you back was when we saw you at the Big Ten tournament with IU. we had a matchup against Penn State, who was one of the powerhouses at the time, and I had a good game. The set piece, I think I scored our only try. We ended up losing like 5-7 or something like that. But they came back and they're like, all right, this guy got some man strength in him. He got some confidence, a little bit more skill set under him. And so that's when me and Stroman came back. My freshman year at IU, we got to go to Kenya for the Junior World Trophy Tournament in 2009. So for things like that, those kind of reasons is kind of where I wanted to pursue rugby over football. And again, I wasn't a huge football prospect. I'm not trying to propose that at all.
Yeah.
And just
But it was options. It was options, and obviously you had to weigh them a little bit, even though you were probably pretty heavily already decided what you want to do. You said you didn't log any minutes, 5 games, 6 weeks away from the family, right after graduation. Were you positive the whole time? What was it like coming home? Were you frustrated at all?
I feel like I've had a disposition where I'm like, I have a role. I'm a teammate. I'm still going to train. It wouldn't help. Like, would it help for me to be, sad about it the whole time? Or I definitely remember there were plenty of positive moments, whether in training or getting selected for a roster but not getting in the game. Like, that was frustrating, of course. But my family actually came to that tournament in Wales, so mom and dad were there.
That's cool.
A lot of my family helped purchase little sponsors within the booklet of the tournament to like help pay for us to go there. So like I had a ton of support. I don't feel like I was alone or sort of down and out that way. It was I'm sure I had good teammates at the time who never brought up the fact that I didn't play up at all, right? It's something everybody knows, nobody says. Yeah. I don't know if there was anybody else on that tour who didn't play like mine did, but I think I'm lucky in that I had the disposition at the time to not take it as a total loss, right? To kind of just keep plugging along, and opportunities like that or in the future don't come along all the while. So it's important to just take what you've learned and stay humble and stay hungry, right? Recognize that you're never as good as you think you are, and you're not always as bad as you think you are either. Just keep the grind. Take in information, take in experiences, get outside your comfort zone every now and again, whether it be physically or socially, asking questions that are hard sometimes, whatever it takes. So, yeah, I wasn't totally down and out for that experience, and obviously proved fruitful.
I appreciate you sharing that. That's huge because there's a lot of times where kids, they don't get their way at a weekend or something like that, and it can be discouraging. But to find the positive, like you said, they weren't going to pick you, but they picked you the next year. Obviously, you worked hard. You made it, turned it into motivation, played well. Did you log any minutes in Kenya?
I did. Well, it's funny. Salty, same coach. We're in Kenya, and we play against the Cayman Islands, our first game.
Wow.
And they weren't that competitive at the time, and I think we knew that going into it. So he didn't even select me for the roster. And he set me aside specifically. He's like, I know exactly what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're feeling. Because here we were a year ago sitting in the same room, same conversation, like, you're not playing today. And I was like, I thought we fixed this kind of thing. And he's like, no, we're just resting you. Like, we probably could beat them with like 10 guys, but we're just going to rest as many guys as we can. So my first U.S. under-20 game was against Kenya at Kenya, which was one of the most hype game environments I think I've ever been in my life. You imagine, it felt like the whole nation of Kenya was at this pitch.
Goodness.
Downtown Nairobi. It was lit, to say the least, and I don't use that word a lot.
Wow.
We ended up losing, but I had my first carry with the ball. I remember it specifically. Chris Saint from Penn State passed me the ball. I ran over who was in front of me, what felt like I ran a half mile. It was like, yeah. And then I ran some lines and ditched it to Cam Dolan. I think we ended up scoring off of it, but it was all the full year and that next week of not playing all came into that run in that moment. So it was a very special moment for me to have it all come to fruition like that.
That's fantastic. Did you have a question?
Yeah. I don't know if we're going forward on your questions, but I just had a question specifically because I know going from high school caliber rugby to, IUPUI, it was a huge difference to me, and it was kind of shocking. Now, going to you, was it a huge difference from IU level to MLR, or what was the difference?
I'm sure in many facets it was. So I went from Indiana to the University of Utah. I think you guys addressed that early on in the pre-show.
Let's back up on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
what made Utah a reality, and to Levi's question, what was the difference between the level of IU to the level of Utah and what it did for you?
Yep. So again, did the U20 tour freshman year. So that would have been 2009. going into the 2010 season, I actually got a call from the USA national team that fall, I think, and they said, hey, we're picking guys for this USA men's national team camp coming up. So, get ready, get fit. And then I think they said they'd follow up in 2 weeks. And on the third week, I emailed them back. And I was like, and they're like, oh, yeah, we didn't tell you. You didn't make the cut. So whatever.
Oh.
Which is fine, right? And I remember my roommates who I think if you know Joe, they were just like, oh, that is just brutal.
They wanted
I had those
it.
kind of motivations going into it, and I made all the while the collegiate All-American team. And I don't know how they do it now, but if you make, there's different levels of first team, second team, honorable mention, whatever. At the time, they took the first team guys or whoever can make it on an international tour usually. And so I'd made that. The first year we went to South Africa, which was cool. Had a good show there. It was right after the Kenya tour, so I still had some momentum going from that. So I performed well in South Africa and got some good recognition there. And so the coaches on that South Africa tour kind of, nudged me to say, hey, nothing against Indiana or the Midwest or whatever, but the obvious better competition and programs for you are out west. You have the Cal Berkeleys, the BYUs, St. Mary's, a lot of those Pac-12 type schools. Where it's just better competition, more exposure. I think that's where a lot of the more competitive athletes for higher programs were. And they said, so if you can swing it, do it. We'd recommend it. I mean, no one's going to hold it against you if you have to stay. Obviously, money's a thing, moving's a thing, family, school's obviously important. And so they helped kind of guide me to some options. One of the All-American coaches on that tour was the head coach at Utah. So he was also a front row coach, so I know I could learn from him. And a good guy, and I think I'd known a few of the guys that played there through the different age grade programs. So the opportunity came to pass where I could transfer from Indiana University to Utah for my junior year. And so to answer Levi's question originally, there was a bit of a difference in program, maybe professionalism between Indiana and Utah. Not that, again, nothing against Indiana. It was just, I think Utah had a longer run of a more professionalized approach to it, maybe a better relationship with the school where you could get access to facilities and more coaches. And obviously the competition was just better. Playing against a BYU, you just wouldn't see that in the Midwest anywhere. Or Cal Berkeley, I remember St. Mary's gave us a good run a few times. So that was a bit of a program and competition shift up from the Midwest to out west. And then after a few years at Utah, again, a couple more All-American tours there where I got to see some good competition. On my last tour, senior year, went to New Zealand for the last All-American tour. One of the forward coaches on that tour, Justin Fitzpatrick, he at the time was one of the U.S. national team coaches and the head coach of the Seattle Saracens up in Seattle. And so here we are in the summer of our last year of school. No one's really sure what they're going to do, but we know we want to keep pursuing rugby. He says, hey, come up here. You can play for the Saracens, a really competitive British Columbia rugby club league. Where, again, there's a lot of good clubs in a concentrated area of both Seattle and lower BC and Vancouver Island, where you could get good competition, plus maybe a shot to give a run at the national team and job connections, which, of course, is an important thing after school. You got to figure out how you're going to support yourself. Right. So that was the move. And so went from Utah to Seattle. My buddy John Cullen and I, he was a Utah football and rugby guy. We went up to Seattle in 2013, started playing for the club. And so there, again, I found myself in a good position to play in a competitive club, men's club atmosphere. That region of Canada where we're near has a high density of rugby history and rugby athletes. Their national team is well hosted there. So I found myself in a good position to keep developing, work under a national team level coach with some national team level guys. We're kind of a big hub for players. Like we got guys from all over the world for not just the pro team now, but for the club team at that time. So it was a good move.
Yeah.
So when you did sign with Seattle, to see what was kind of like you said that's kind of what you did after college. When you signed with Seattle in this new MLR that they were kind of putting together, I know they kind of struggled with a different league, and I know it was different people before that. What were your expectations for the team and the MLR?
That's right. You bring up a good point. Pro rugby in America has been tried before, right? It's not the first time this has sort of been done or approached. I remember, was it Pro Rugby was the league?
Yeah.
I'd gotten an offer to move from Seattle to do the Sacramento team at the time.
That's right.
And I don't remember exactly why it didn't pan out. It could have just been logistics or contractual questions that didn't get answered. So I didn't pursue that, and I've always been a little remiss. Like, what could have happened? Could I have had a fantastic season down there and moved on and done something else? Who knows? But I wanted to stick it out. I'd gotten a chance to take a run with the U.S. men's national team at a couple of camps leading up to the 2015 World Cup. Went on tour with the USA Select team, the Eagles Select. So not like the Eagles proper, but basically like a developmental tour to kind of eyeball some new talent or get, existing talent some more reps on an international stage. So I got to go to Argentina and Uruguay to compete on that tour and get some more exposure that way, as well as compete at a higher level. So that kind of, again, good drivers for motive out the way of where I wanted to be at the time, and gave me some credibility going into Major League Rugby, right? So I could say, hey, I'm here in Seattle. Let's play for this team. Sign me up. I've done this, this, and this over the last 6 or 7 years. So yeah, that was sort of the pathway that kind of set me up for MLR.
So what was the Seawolves a fit because of a certain coach or system and connections you may have had, or was it because you lived out in that area? Is that what led you to the Seawolves?
I mean, logistics is an obvious, reason to stick around there. I had talked to other clubs, or like even Utah would have been a viable option, right? I knew people there, went to school there. But I also, going out of school, I didn't just want to pursue rugby. I knew that career development was an equal pathway. Like, it was important to me to sort of build a legitimate traditional professional career on one end and also pursue rugby as much as I could. So here in Seattle, I had the opportunity to do both. I work for an employer that's been overwhelmingly supportive of my rugby pursuits. So when I went to Uruguay and Argentina, for example, they, were happy to let me use all my PCO to go on that 2 or 3 week tour. If I have to travel for a MLR game or, come a little late to work due to early morning practice, they're accommodating to that as long as I put in my work on the back end. So that was probably my prime motivation to be able to do both at the same time, to play in a town that I know with people I know. And for a competitive squad, again, we had a really competitive player pool here inherently before MLR. And so for this franchise, it wasn't the hardest transition for them to recruit because there's a lot of good guys already here. So yeah, logistically and just in terms of all mutual goals, it was a good move to stay in Seattle and pursue the job here.
So being full-time rugby with the MLR, because I know there's some people that are, whether you get a game in at the MLR level or their second team, being the full-time rugby player and having a contract with them, I know some of these high school players and college players, they talk about it like it's going to put them in a financial situation to really benefit. Can you just kind of touch base on, you're married, you got a kid on the way, balancing work, and I know they work with you, like you said, but balancing work, the training, the travel, the games, what it does to your body, but also trying to be a husband and be prepared to be a dad. What's the stress of that and the reality to some of these high school kids that think this is something maybe a little different than it is? Because it's pure. You couldn't play at the MLR level without the passion for the sport that you guys have. It's not there financially. It's not there for other ways that people probably see professional sports in America. What's the balance and what's it like on a spouse like your wife? Like, that's got to be tough.
Well, you've addressed a few important areas for everyone to consider, and are certainly applicable to anyone who's involved. No matter where you came from, what your work student status is or development, all those things are important to consider. I'll answer your question with a question. How much time you got, Joe? Because I'll start with my wife, for example. I got lucky falling in love with a woman who she's overwhelmingly supportive of my rugby pursuits. As far as, years. She's just always been behind me and understands my physical and time sacrifices she gets from her end, how she's not going to have me at home all the time. You work a full-time job and also have a full-time rugby commitments and time and effort. She gets it, but she also loves it too. It's really good for our family. Same for my family back home. I think that's been probably one of my biggest fuels for this whole experience my whole life, is just having folks behind me to help, whether it be, with their time, drive me to practice, finances, whatever. I think I'm lucky in that regard to have that sort of support. But the realities of, the ground level experience, you're right, it is not comparable in terms of compensation or infrastructure to the big five sports that we all know and love. So that's something to consider. I think it's important for everybody, especially for young athletes going into contractual situations, take a really good look at it and ask for guidance on it. Maybe you'll get some movement on it, maybe it won't, but it's important to understand, what you're signing, what you're looking at. That the time and effort's a real thing. It adds up both on the body and on the mind, especially for those, if you have kids. I can't imagine what it's going to be like over this next year, having a baby for the first time, but a lot of guys have done it. It's very doable, but you have to find the balance. It's essential to find your priorities and to strive for them, and sort of make no excuses if you're gonna push it hard.
Yeah.
And it's you got to know the price you're making. Are you gonna try to pursue this avenue? You got to know you're giving up other opportunity costs. It could be developing a career. It could be school for some, starting a family for others, or other setups or plans you had. That's what it's kind of about. If you're watching that Michael Jordan documentary, and I guess this isn't totally comparable, they're like, hey, man, what do you say to people when you're kind of a jerk or you had to sacrifice this? And he's like, that's what it is. We won, but it's a sacrifice.
Right. Absolutely. Levi asked a lot of those kind of questions, and I think it's important at the college level because when you and I were in high school, there really wasn't much recruiting. Midwest tournaments, you could go all weekend without talking to a college coach. If you go to a national tournament or a college tournament or a high school tournament now in Midwest, there's so many coaches and recruiting and social media reaching out to. And Levi always comes to me with questions, and he's pursuing a good career in education and being a teacher, but he also is pursuing really a career in rugby as well because it is right there for him talent-wise and passion-wise. I think the ones that make it as far as you have are probably figuring out the balance.
Exactly that. And again, I maybe if I were to, quit my full-time job now and say, hey, Seawolves, I want to do this and then some, I could be in a different position. I know that I value career growth on one side and rugby growth on the other side is a good balance. I think, I don't know what the stats are, but if you look at the rosters across the whole league, I bet you'd find that maybe a third of the guys on a given roster aren't doing rugby full-time. They're probably doing a side job or a normal full-time career. Again, that could vary from club to club, but that might be the right comparison for our club. Like, we have guys who are trying to do both. And the franchise is helpful in that too. They recognize that. They try to work scheduling as best they can, or have strength coaches meet you after work to do your gym session or whatever it takes. It's a young league developing, right? So it's about sustainability. So whether it be the cap room of how you pay players, or the logistics of how you're moving around, or that balance of is it pro, is it semi-pro, and we got guys working kind of thing. It needs to grow sustainably. So it's going to have to blossom like that, where guys are going to have to sacrifice a bit here and there. You're not going to make multi-millions as a rookie contract, so get that through your head quick.
That's a good point. If it grew too quick, it'd almost probably crash and burn.
Do they have projections?
And again, we've had, in terms of what?
As in like a timeline of when they're expecting it to grow. Like, do they have a guess when it's going to be bigger, or?
Not that I've seen. I don't know if I could verify like how much money is the MLR going to make in 10 years. I know that they do gauge it by franchise edition, right? So they started with 6 or 7 teams, moved to 9 or 10. You might expect a couple more franchises next year. If I remember correctly, I think they modeled it after Major League Soccer, comparable in that each franchise owns equal stake in the league.
Yeah.
So everybody puts their money together and distributes it out for player compensation. Also in the same structure where they did kind of steadily add cities, add franchises slowly and sustainably, again, to kind of control things as much as they can and hopefully better project the kind of question you're asking, like not doing too much too fast or not doing enough out in the middle. It's just a slow progression, well, a modestly slow progression.
Right.
Right. And real quick, and I'll just move on to the last couple of questions. One, I think they do have 2 more teams coming because they're actually the first 2 picks in the MLR draft in June. And then 2, it's exciting rugby when you watch it. It's not low. It's pretty well put together, from the camera work to the announcers to the systems that we can see you guys play and run. I know coaching at Brownsburg, so many times during the week at practice we would run our system, and on Saturday, if there was rain or the other team ran a completely different system, it was like 2 cars going real fast at each other, and both systems were hard to find and watch, and it just looked like chaos like we used to play in 2006 and 2007. But when you watch it, you see the systems and the camera work in it, and it's really well put together. It is. It's really easy to watch.
Yeah.
I give a lot of credit to all the people behind it, whether it be the owners, the admin in the league, the players and their families. Everyone's sort of done their part to make sure that it's not just, as a league growing sustainably, but the quality of the product is also developing too. 2 years ago, you watch some of those games, they might be very basic compared to the footy that you're watching in this recent season. I think it's a good balance of, domestic American athletes, bringing in some athletes from overseas, coaches, refs from overseas as well. I think having that sort of melting pot vibe is all the better for the league and its development of the product and what you see on the field.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all been good, sustainable progression for it.
I agree. So kind of a two-part question. What? So we know there's been 2 complete seasons. Unfortunately, the one here recently was cut short. Both seasons, Seattle wins the MLR Championship. You guys get this big shield that's just so impressive. It's so cool. It probably weighs 7,000 pounds. Can you talk a little bit about the feeling of winning a championship at that level? That's the highest level in our country. Winning the championship at that level, and then what does Seattle? How does Seattle feel about your rugby team and the MLR? I know soccer does really well out there. They are known for being the 12th man for the Seahawks. Everybody that I talk to that likes basketball wants the Supersonics back in Seattle. What is there? I mean, they seem to really get behind their sports teams. What has that been like, and how do they support the team and the league MLR?
Yeah, I'll start with your first question. Winning the first 2, surreal. It was electric on both occasions. You can imagine the big buildup of a long preseason in the rainy, cloudy, cold days of Seattle, and the long season that's very trying with injuries and losses and uncertainties. And then you finally get there and it happens, and it's just electric. I think we're especially lucky. I mean, winning back-to-back championships and anything is very special and rare, so we're appreciative of that. We're also the first. So I think that's going to prove as one of the most special features for all of us who are involved, is that when this thing pans out for the course of our lifetime, we're going to be the first ones who did it. And in terms of Seattle, big sports town, huge fan of it. I was surprised when I moved up here how, the fans are just crazy. Every sport you look at, even rowing, it's a big rowing town. So on like rowing day, when they row through the cut between, I think it's Elliott Bay and Lake Washington by the University of Washington, it's big, man. It's a big sports town. And luckily, Seattle was a big rugby town inherently. Like it's had a long rugby tradition through a few different clubs for men's and women, and their youth programs have done really well. You'll note a number of national team players, I believe for both men's and women's, from local high school clubs. So rugby's not new here. And it proved favorable, not just for like the inherent talent that was here and sort of some of the infrastructure. We had some club rugby people who helped build the pro rugby scene. The fans are just mad. I think we're credited with maybe not the most, but consistently a pretty packed house at our stadium. They fill it out. I think they sell out most of our home games, and you can hear it, you can feel it, and it makes for a really fun playing environment and really competitive. Right, when other teams come here, they're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is for real, right? You're not playing in some empty stadium in whereversville. This is like the rugby town. Seattle's produced champions at the club and professional level for like the last 10 years, whether it be sevens, women's, men's, club or pro. They've done it well here for a long time.
Levi, I saw his eyes get big. One thing I think, because we play at Carroll Stadium downtown Indy, where the Indy 11 played, and when you have Kentucky come for a game, there's a pretty decent amount of fans. Some other games there's only maybe like 200 people there, but we've pushed 500-600 people. I know that's not a lot, but I know Levi likes playing in front of the fans. He's one of those players that really he doesn't hide from it. You said you guys sell out. Is that more fans for a Seattle game at home or more fans at a Utah BYU game? Because I know those crowds were amazing too.
I'd say it's pretty comparable, actually. The Wasatch Cup, IU versus BYU. BYU had a big following, big crowd. It's probably comparable. Mid 6,000 at the BYU game. That was also very electric.
Yeah. You said 6,000?
Yeah. And of course that region. Wow. I think so. It was loud, y'all.
The
Crazy.
Utah BYU games I've seen. I remember a national championship around the time that you went there. I think it might have been a year before or after or something. The crowd for a Utah BYU game. I mean, we played in Utah and we saw Jesuit and Highland play against each other, and that was the real deal crowd. So I mean, they don't play around out there. So I don't
exactly.
I'm not,
Between Seattle and Salt Lake City or Provo, they've also comparable long history of youth, college and now professional rugby scene. It's now that I think about it, I've been very blessed to live in some serious rugby towns. It makes it a lot more fun and definitely extra motivating when you hear the crowd get electric, they get loud. You hear your family, you hear friends hollering at you. Like, it gives you that extra boost when you're sucking wind, like I tend to do.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Levi, did you want to ask a question before I ask these last two?
Yeah. So like you said, I've definitely been training and trying to get myself better for that's my dream. I want to play MLR. So what would you recommend for like first steps? Because I know there's other teammates that I have that are also interested. What would you say first steps are?
Yep, it's never too soon to start controlling the controllables, right? So things like fitness, I think is something we all can work on, as much skill development as you can. And also things like networking. Like I'm not saying it's a totally political environment, but it doesn't hurt to know more people or to reach out and ask questions to, those youth or collegiate rugby development people we've spoken to. Getting as much exposure as you can, either as a player or on a stage where you can get selected. That all helps. But I would say, control the controllables, know your weaknesses early. So if it's size you need to put on, start eating better and more often and work out. I know that my body composition and in general, conditioning and fitness is a constant work on. It has been since, I think, 4th grade.
Yeah.
I've never had a six pack, and if I take a week off or certainly a month off, like I'm back at square one in terms of my cardio and my body comp. I'm lucky in Seattle. I've been working with some great S&C coaches, had some good guidance from teammates, and now a nutritionist who's gotten me on some rugby specific approaches for off season and out of season. It's like mind blowing stuff, but why would I know stuff about high performance nutrition? You got to ask the questions. You need to look in the mirror and say, this is something I need to work on.
Right.
And find the resources early. And now that, you and Joe have been talking about how competitive the college scene is for recruiting and how there's a lot more interest in MLR, which is great. It's a great trend and probably is a good problem to have at some point, which means there's more competition, right? So you have to start setting yourselves apart. And proving yourself on film is ultimately the best way, right?
Yeah.
If you can send somebody a full game tape and say minutes 1 through 80, I'm on it. That's the one. Highlight reels are cool and fun, and everyone likes to put themselves to cool music. But it's an 80-minute game, right? And that's what selectors and coaches want to see. Work rate, skills, being a good teammate too. They're not going to select a jerk. Or if they do, they're going to find out real quick.
Yeah. What do coaches look for, like, in specific, right out the gate, when you're trying to put yourself out there?
Like I said, I think the man under the jersey is certainly a factor. I know it sounds kind of, I don't know, cliche, but that's what the culture of the sport brings out, the culture and the people. And I don't think you're going to have a lot of jerks that are going to succeed. They may be great athletes and very well skilled and experienced, but on any stage in any country, I bet that's probably the same approach, the same mindset. So make sure you're covering your P's and Q's, personally, and people want to play with good teammates. You need to be coachable, right? Accept constructive criticism or feedback. So you may submit a film tape or talk to a selector and be like, we're not interested. Here's things you should work on. Take it. Like, don't shy away from it, or necessarily, it's okay to be mad for a minute, I guess, but use it as fuel, use it as ammunition for your development. Because you never know when those opportunities are going to come. You never know the timing of it. So again, control the controllables is what I would say, especially in this environment. Again, we're still pretty young as a country and in this league and everything. So you just never know when your shot's going to come.
Yep.
No, definitely. There's a couple things I want to touch on that you just brought up. Like you said, you never know who's watching. You don't know when your Penn State game is, right? Like when you had your game against Penn State. Levi and I both very much agree. It is the man underneath the jersey. I'm so glad you said that, and they can hear it coming from an MLR player, because the reason that we started this was for people to share their stories. And if you listen to my story, I said when you're reaching out to a college coach or a higher level coach, don't send them the highlight. or not just the rugby highlights and how fast you can run. Let them know the person you are. Sell yourself as a person and not a rugby player. I said that when I was talking in my story, and I'm glad you confirmed that because there's so much truth that some of these players, they send the highlight film, but I've had coaches above me and I've told coaches below me, if I can see a whole game film and he looks like one of the best players on the field and he motivates the players to the left and to the right of him, that's what we want. I don't want the guy that has 7 minutes of really long runs because 7 minutes out of 30 games that you sent me, what does that really mean? So I'm really glad that you touched base on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The man underneath the jersey. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It goes well beyond the field, right? What we're doing is not just trying to play rugby at a high level and create a good sports environment for us and our friends and families and the fans. We're working out in the community. I know I can speak on behalf of our franchises and many others that we're trying to impact and influence our community in as many ways as we can. Take the stage that we're on and the quality content of people that we have, and try to help our community in different ways. Countless nonprofits we're a part of.
Yep.
Supporting the local youth scene in your area is a big one. So if you can add that, recruiter or somebody says, hey, tell me about you, be like, I volunteer, I help coach, I'm a family man, whatever. Those are all, obviously you got to put a product on the field that has to prove well. But I'd say those other factors are almost as pivotal as that.
Well, it's like me. I'm an insurance agent in sales, and there's two different salesmen that do really well. And you had said it. The guy that's really good, but he's a jerk. He reminds me of a scam artist. They do really good in sales for 3 years, but then they burn out, and they usually bring other people down with them.
Mm-hmm.
But the good people may start a little slow in sales, but those are the ones you can trust, and people treat you like you're a resource to them and what you are selling or what you're doing, and you're going to last a lot longer by being a good teammate, a good person, a good really believing in what you sell.
And to that point, Joe, it's like all this high level pursuit you have, even if it doesn't go the way you want, one, you could say you gave it your all, right? Like there's a ton of value in that. And as young cats now, as you get older, it's again cliche to say, but if you truly can look in the mirror and say you did everything you could and bust it out, you're going to be better for it as an athlete and as a person anyway. And it'll prove fruitful again in your family life and your work life.
Yep.
So yeah, keep that in mind.
I have one more question. I think Levi does too. My last question, you may not know, you may know, when the rugby playing days, at least a professional level, are done, maybe some boxing days or whatever, that doesn't necessarily count, but when the playing days are done, is there a plan for how you would like to stay in the rugby community, whether it's coaching, staying with Seattle Seawolves, starting a high school program, whatever it may be? I know you might have a little rugger on the way, so it could be that. But have you kind of thought about, I hate to say it, Mike, but we're in our 30s, man. I mean, it's crazy, but this is a young man's sport. Oh, yeah, sorry, 24, 25. So
it's a smart question. That's a smart question.
So what's the plan? I mean, rugby's been such an important thing in your life. Surely you can't just walk away and not have the same love, even though you're not playing.
No, yeah, it's important to recognize what the game gives you and that you have to reciprocate it. You have to give back. At least that's my thought on the matter. I've had some good success managing in rugby so far. The Washington Athletic Club, or the WAC, is currently the Sevens National Championship team. We won the Sevens Club Nationals last year, so I got to help manage that team. Managed one of the Waisele Serevi select teams for Sevens a couple of Vegas tournaments ago. So management, I have a good skill set for management. I don't really belong on a high-level Sevens field, frankly. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But managing is one of those things that I can do well. Organizing people, planning, getting people what they need at the time. I like the administration of it. You get to help coordinate stuff on the field, stuff off the field, stuff like that. So that could be a pursuit for me eventually. I actually studied sports management and focused on youth rugby development in school. So I've had a good experience working with Atavis here in Seattle, or kind of helping youth coaching wherever I end up. I think in some capacity I want to just get involved somehow. I don't know about coaching or whatever, but I think administration at the very least would be something I can pursue. I'd like to think reffing at some point, but man, that's just as much running as playing.
Oh man, I mean, hey, at least you got somebody in your family you can ask about. Ask Mr. Sheperd right there; he'll teach you all about it.
He had his time. Good man.
He sure did. That's
what
great.
Did he do? Did he do middle school reffing back in Brownsville?
He did do some middle school, yes, and then I don't know if he ever got to, I think he might have got to like some B-side high school games. I think he came to like one of our games, and I was like, thanks for coming out. And he was like, I'm coaching the B-side game. I believe that to be true.
Good Lord.
My first year with PJ at
Good on
the
him.
high
He's
school
been an
level.
excellent student of the game. He never played growing up, but once I started getting involved, he's just been a fanatic about it. And reffing is one of the best ways to learn and to get exposed and to try something new, so that wouldn't be a bad one. I think everybody should at least try a level 1 coaching class or something just to say you did it and learn something you never would think of normally.
Hey,
those are a few of my thoughts.
Awesome. When it comes to coaching, I know a guy here in Indianapolis. Probably bring you on to help coach. I think it's IUPUI. They might like to have you. I think we could work something out.
Do you have a number I could?
Actually, I think he's all right. He's a little busy. But I only text. I like ask like once a month to come out here and help. I mean,
he needs all the help he can get.
Nah, I believe that.
That's great. No, I really appreciate your time. Levi does have a question/favor to go ahead and ask you.
Yeah. Mike, first off, thank you for, spending this time to come up on, Rugby Chalk Talk with us. It's been great. I know it's one of the greatest stories, I've wanted to hear since Joe talked about it. But my last favor slash question. We asked the guy from Withrow to, exchange a shirt, Withrow Rugby. We're trying to have souvenirs for every episode we try to record. So would you be interested in kind of exchanging an IUPI Rugby shirt for anything from Seattle, a rugby ball, a jersey, a shirt? It doesn't matter. Anything.
I think we can handle that for you, man. I'd be happy to swap some kit with you. Again, one of those facets of the sport and the culture. Trading kit is a very cool thing to do. And to your point, I appreciate being on here. Thanks for having me. I think it's really cool what you do with this, recording and podcast. Obviously, great success with IUPUI in recent years. So keep up the good work. And, we'll get you some Seattle swag out in the Midwest. You might get some eyeballs and head turns wearing green and blue. But
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you and the family in the next journey. It's going to be amazing. I've taken part in raising an 11-year-old boy. They're going to test you, no matter how old, the gender, it doesn't matter. But there's going to be some times where you're not allowed to laugh. You're going to want to laugh, but you're not allowed to laugh. It encourages them, Mike. I'm telling you. But it's such a beautiful thing, man. And we're really proud of you. From back home. I know Biggins and Trout and Corey Holt and all these people that when I run into them and we bring up old times, man, we're all just so proud of you. And it's not because you're playing at the MLR level, but it's about the fact that you have chased your dream and been so well balanced the whole way. Some young kid, I know Levi was super excited about this one, this interview with you, but somebody's listening and always watching, and you're just such a great example. Keep it up. We're really proud of you, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, buddy.
I appreciate that sentiment very much. Thanks. Always good to see you. Appreciate our friendship, and again, good luck to you both. Stay in touch, and we'll get you some Seattle kit here soon.
You're the man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We'll
That
see you.
said,